Imagine a courtroom so charged that you could hear the beat of a heartbeat resonating against the walls. Kody Brown stands behind the defense table, perspiration beading on his forehead, as his wives, past and present, sit split down opposite sides of the room. Secrets are going to be spilled, and once they are, nothing in the Brown family will ever remain the same. If you believe the sister-wives drama was crazy on TV, wait until you hear what happened when the family war made its way to a judge's courtroom. Stay with me because by the end you'll be wondering about everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and betrayal. Courtroom is tiny compared to what you'd think it would be, almost cramped. The air is slightly scented with old wood and ink, that kind of smell that gets a room full of legal wrangling hanging around its pages. Kody Brown fidgets in his seat, pulling at the sleeves of his shirt as if he's trying to keep his grip. His jaw is set, his blonde curls slightly mussed. Across the aisle, Christine is stiff, her eyes hard and unyielding. She's not only here as a witness, she's here as a person who feels like she finally gets to get out her truth. The judge enters, robes swishing against the polished floor. The bailiff's voice cuts the air like a knife. All rise. Every eye turns forward, but not before sneaking quick glances at the wives, each sitting with their own storm of emotions. Robyn dabs her eyes with a tissue already. Meri's face is unreadable, and Janelle seems torn, caught between loyalty and silent rebellion. Narration: it's not just a legal battle. It's a reckoning decades in the making. At its core, the case involves accusations of financial betrayal, secret assets, and the consequences of a family brought down by secrets too heavy to hide behind closed doors. Christine leans forward, softly confiding something in her attorney. He nods, makes a notation on his pad, and pats her arm, firm, comforting. Down the aisle, Kody grumbles to Robyn, his voice harsh but quiet, his hand chopping at the air in irritation. Then the initial blow arrives. Christine's attorney rises, clears his throat, and informs the court, "We will establish that Mr. Brown has manipulated not just his family but also his finances. We will demonstrate that beneath the smiling face of sister wives there is a man who deceived the very individuals who constructed his life with him." Kody slaps his hand against the table hard enough to draw a reaction but not hard enough to earn a warning. Robyn catches his arm, half whispering, "Relax, please." His gaze never wavers from Christine. They bring the first witness in. It's Janelle. The room adjusts as she stands, moving slowly, her shoulders strained but chin held high. She's sworn in, and as she steps up onto the stand, you can sense the weight of her words before she even says them. Her tone is firm at the beginning. She speaks of the beginning, the shared aspirations, the promise of togetherness that held them all once. But then cracks start appearing. She speaks of the fights, the secrecy, and ultimately the revelation of financial transactions she alleges were done without her knowledge. Money transferred, accounts emptied, properties kept hidden. Kody's lawyer objects, charging exaggeration, but the judge insists that she go on. Janelle swallows hard, her eyes flashing towards Christine for a moment before returning to the jury. "I was quiet for years," she says, her voice shaking now. "But it was silence that made it possible. Silence that destroyed us." Courtroom is so silent it seems as if the walls are listening. Kody slams his head back and forth, writing notes and shoving them across to his attorney, but his anger is etched on his face. Christine sits back, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes, and Meri looks away, pretending to merge into the wooden bench. Narration switches. The audience can feel it. This is not all about money. This is about years of pent-up anger, the unseen stories behind the sanitized television moments. Each testimony transcends evidence. It's a heartbreak confession. By the time Janelle retires, the room seems to be heavier, the air nearly sticky with tension. The judge orders a brief recess, and the families disperse. Some cluster with attorneys, others sit in isolation, looking at the floor, absorbed. As Kody bursts into the corridor, photographers snap photographs, journalists call out questions. "Mr. Brown, did you actually conceal assets from your wives? Are you worried Christine will reveal the truth?" He refuses to answer, scowling instead before escaping into a doorway. Christine, on the other hand, emerges with her attorney by her side. her expression serene but her eyes ablaze. She is aware this is merely the tip of the iceberg. Cliffhanger. Once recess is over, the next witness is brought in. And this time, it's Robyn. Courtroom waits with bated breath for the woman Kody has fought hardest for to come and testify. The recess is over and the anxiety in the courtroom grows as Robyn Brown glides to the witness stand, each step slow, her face white but set, holding a tissue as if it were her sword, and when she raises her right hand to take the oath, the courtroom seems to be holding its breath, because Robyn is not merely another wife. She is the wife Kody has defended most aggressively over the years, the one who appeared to maintain his allegiance above all others, and that puts her testimony at risk for all of them. The judge nods for her to start, and Robyn's voice shakes initially on the verge of breaking, but then levels out as she speaks. This family has been my entire life, but there are things I can no longer deny. All eyes flash to Kody, who tightens his jaw, holding onto the table with such force his knuckles turn white, and then to Christine, whose eyes slash with the excitement of confirmation, sensing this moment could destroy all that Kody's attempted to shelter. Robyn reminisces about midnight talks with Kody, whispered negotiations over property titles and finances that were sold to her as for the benefit of the family, but which she now concedes appeared more and more one-sided, and her voice breaks as she speaks. I thought I was safeguarding us, but perhaps I was safeguarding him. Gasps spread through the courtroom, Meri buries her head in her hands, and Janelle breathes out hard, as though years have passed before she heard Robyn utter those words. Kody creeps forward, muttering under his breath, "Don't do this." But Robyn doesn't even glance at him. She glances at Christine as if nodding in secret recognition of the years of suffering and betrayal. The lawyer for Christine doesn't miss a beat, asking, "Mrs. Brown, are you telling me that Mr. Brown told you to hide financial things from the other wives?" Robyn swallows hard, her eyes welling with tears. I don't want to say it in those words, but yes, that's how it felt. The jury tenses, the judge squints, and instantly this is no longer a domestic family argument, it is now a charge of knowing dishonesty. Kody's attorney jumps up at once, his voice booming. "Speculation!" She's distorting offhand talk, but the judge dismisses him with the observation that Robyn's testimony is a matter of her perception, which is admissible. Kody bangs his hand down once more, grumbling indignantly. This is insane, and for the first time, viewers can observe the facade slipping from the surface of calm, charismatic TV personality. The courtroom crowd hums, the hum like waves off the walls, and Christine leans forward, whispering something to her lawyer that makes him smile meanly. Robyn's fissures of loyalty have just left a door open wide enough to drive a case through. The questioning persists, pinning Robyn on individual instances, and she begrudgingly acknowledges there were moments when things were signed for in secret, moments when Christine and Janelle were excluded from essential discussion, and when asked why she tolerated it, Robyn's voice trembles. "Because I trusted him, because he said it was the way to be able to protect us." She buries her face in her hands, and the room is quiet except for the sound of her tears, and in that quiet the unspoken truth looms heavy. Kody abused trust not just in marriage but in survival. Christine's lawyer drives the point home, reading out details of financial papers, linking them to Robyn's evidence, piecing together a picture of a man who took great care with his family finances and led them to believe it was in their best interest. And Kody seethes, face red, eyes flashing at Robyn like knives, as if betrayal flames more intensely because it is from the one person he never expected to betray. And in the meantime, Meri sits in stony silence, lips clenched together so tightly they're nearly white, her silence more deafening than any words, and Janelle, for a change, looks at Robyn with a near pity. Because although Robyn has stood up for Kody for years, in this moment she has joined the others in revealing him. The judge finally calls a break in the testimony, reminding the jury to consider facts over emotions, but his tone carries weight. It's clear even he feels the storm in the room. As Robyn resigns, she lets her shoulders slump as though the effort of speaking has used all her strength, and when she walks past Kody, he will not even glance her way, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed ahead, a wordless barrier of anger and disillusionment. The relatives move in slow silence as the lawyers draw up the next step, but tension is already seeping through the walls, and out in the parking lot, reporters dash to get every word of what has just transpired. Down the hallway, the whispers break out. Did you hear what Robyn did? Did you catch Kody's expression? And with every whisper the story changes, the public opinion shifting, and Kody feels the waters turning against him. Back in the house as proceedings continue, Christine's attorney calls the next witness, a financial advisor who had previously worked with the Browns in their reality show dealings, and now suddenly the tale becomes even more acutely defined, for now it's not only family against family, it's family against hard, cold facts. Consultant sets out in meticulous detail how the show's revenue was split up, how there were separate accounts opened, and how peculiar discrepancies showed up in the acquisitions of properties that did more for Kody and Robyn than anyone else. Documents and charts are thrown up on the courtroom screen, digits that look dry but reveal a damning tale of cronyism and secret advantage. And as the consultant answers, Christine observes the jury hard, noticing nods, noticing pens jot notes. Kody's attorney attempts to impeach the consultant, arguing bias or faulty recall, but the documents themselves are harsh and irrefutable. As the consultant finishes, Christine's lawyer spins around radically, standing tall and finger pointing straight at Kody, saying, "This wasn't mismanagement. This was strategy. This was control masquerading as leadership." The phrase rings out in the courtroom like a finding already made, and Kody, finally cracking, stands up yelling, "That's a lie! I gave up everything for this family." The judge bangs his gavel, telling him to sit, and the room breaks out in a second of murmurs, jurors looking at each other with more than words can say. They've witnessed his rage, they've witnessed his disintegration. Robyn covers her face, Christine sits motionless, Janelle crosses her arms over her chest, and Meri, for once, releases a tiny, sour laugh before quickly covering her mouth. The day's proceedings conclude with the courtroom abuzz, no resolution in sight but a direction certain. Kody Brown is not the man the world believed he was, not the man his family believed he was, and the case is just starting to lay bare the layers of fraud. Out in the parking lot, journalists push microphones into Christine. "Do you feel vindicated by today's testimony?" And replies with serene steel tones in her voice, "I feel heard." At the same time, Kody blows past cameras, his face crimson, declining to comment, Robyn following behind him in tears. As the families spread out into the darkness, one thing becomes inescapable. The next session will slice even deeper, and what has been revealed so far is merely the tip of an even darker center. The third session arrives on a gray morning, the courthouse encircled by groups of reporters and spectators who have come to treat this trial as less courtroom drama and more ultimate reality TV event, and within the walls of the courtroom there is an almost palpable sense of difference in the air today, a weightiness, as if everyone feels that something is about to crack. Kody comes in first, accompanied by his attorney, his face a stone monument, his lips pinched so tightly together that it appears as though he's keeping all of the world inside. But behind the mask his eyes are frantic, wandering, restless, searching for a glimpse that perhaps today won't end in catastrophe. Christine walks in next, serene but keen, her attorney at her side, and the wives, Janelle subdued but unwavering, Meri remote but in attendance, and Robyn, who appears to have been up all night, eyes red and puffy, hands shaking as she grips a tissue. When the judge summons the room to order, there is a quietude that makes even the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead feel intrusive. Christine's lawyer doesn't dawdle. "Your Honor, today we will be hearing testimony from a witness whose words will shed light on the very center of this case." A whispered movement ripples through the room as the name is announced. It is Leon, Meri and Kody's son, who has kept largely in the background since leaving the family limelight, and suddenly the courtroom crackles with energy because this is not another witness. This is blood, someone whose voice can cut more deeply than any outsider's recollection. Leon strides to the stand with a combination of bravado and evident jitters, shoulders set but eyes giving away a tempest within, and when they are sworn in, Kody fidgets uneasily, his fingers clenching into fists under the table. The initial questions are tentative, as if hesitant to ask, about life growing up in the Brown family, about living under scrutiny, but then the questions become pointed. "Did you ever see discussions of finances or observe inconsistencies in how money was managed within your family?" Leon's tone is calm but tinged with resentment. "Yes, I saw things. I saw favoritism. I witnessed choices made behind the scenes, choices that hurt my mom, hurt others, and we were instructed to just accept it as the way things are." Kody recoils as if the words are blows to his body, shaking his head wildly, mouthing, "That's not true." But the jury is transfixed on Leon, their genuineness captivating them, the nakedness born of someone who has lived within these walls. The lawyer continues, requesting concrete examples, and Leon describes moments that cut like daggers, Moments when Christine and Janelle were left out of money talks, moments when Robyn appeared to be privy to more information regarding property buys than anyone else, moments when Kody's voice became cold and authoritative when anyone dared disagree with him. Leon's eyes dart to Robyn, who glances down in shame, tears pouring down her face, and then to Christine, who ever so slightly nods to encourage him. "It wasn't about money," Leon goes on, his voice cracking now. "It was about power. Dad had to be in charge, always, and anyone who challenged that had to pay with silence or manipulation." The jury shifts restlessly, some jotting notes, others openly looking at Kody, whose face is red with rage, his body wound tight like a spring about to unwind. His attorney objects once more on grounds of irrelevance, but the judge overrules. This testimony speaks to motive, to pattern, to the heart of the case. And as Leon speaks, the air thickens with emotion, because this is no longer about contracts or legal jargon. It's about children watching their parents fracture under the weight of secrets. Undefined. Christine's attorney steps back, letting Leon's words hang heavy, and then Kody's lawyer approaches, his voice calm but sharp, attempting to dismantle the testimony. Undefined. "Leon, isn't it true that you've had personal disagreements with your father unrelated to finances? Isn't it possible that you're biased against him?" Undefined. Leon sits up, their voice calm once more. "Of course I've disagreed. Undefined, but that doesn't negate what I saw. One bit. If anything, it makes me even more determined to tell. Because I lived in the house, I lived in the family, and I watched people I love get hurt." The room is quiet, the effect unavoidable, and for the first time, Kody appears like a man trapped, his defense weakening not due to evidence brought by outsiders but because his own daughter has validated the cracks in his empire. Christine stands silently, eyes brimming with grief and vindication, as Meri finally lifts her head, glistening eyes fixed on Leon, a mix of pride and remorse on her face. Robyn buries her face completely, face shrouded by shaking hands, unable to look at the agony of betrayal spreading around her. As Leon finally leaves, the courtroom is empty, as if everyone has been drained by the weight of their words, and as they pass by Kody, they do not glance his way but at their mother, who tightens her hand around theirs, never needing to say, "Thank you." The judge orders a recess to allow feelings to settle, but the harm is done. Kody's credibility is now exposed to the world. In the hallway, reporters gather once more, cameras pushed forward, asking, "Do you think Leon's testimony will influence the jury?" But Christine provides only a serene, "I think the truth always surfaces." While Kody charges into a side corridor, barking at his attorney, his voice ringing against walls, "They're turning my family against me! They're using my own children as weapons." Robyn attempts to calm him, but he recoils, his fury spilling freely, the facade of control broken for anyone who hears. And when the session picks up again, the suspense only grows, for the next item of evidence is not a human but an audio, illegally recorded voicemail from Kody to Janelle from one of their angry arguments. As the recording is heard, the courtroom becomes filled with the sound of Kody's voice, stern and authoritative. "You will do as I say, Janelle. I've given up everything for this family, and if you think that you can take on me, think again. I'm in charge here, not you." The words ring out like thunder, icy and dictatorial, a far cry from the image of a doting patriarch Kody always attempted to convey. Gasps run through the crowd, jurors glance at one another, and Christine's lawyer allows the pause following the recording to stand for a long, long time for all individuals in the room to process what they have heard. Kody stands up rapidly, yelling, "That's taken out of context. That wasn't what I meant." But the harm is done, the recorded voice is his, and no context can delete the poison that dripped from those words. The judge slams down his gavel, calling for order, but the courtroom seems on the brink of chaos. Robyn weeps hysterically now, her tissue torn into pieces in her hand, but Janelle sits resolute, her gaze set on the jury as if challenging them to notice the reality behind Kody's made-up facade. Christine is serene, her calm undisturbed, and Meri finally gazes at Kody with something that's almost pity but hardens into icy aloofness within seconds. The day concludes with the jury shaken to the core, whispers echoing in the courtroom as it departs, everyone aware that this session has altered all. What started as a case involving money has evolved into a case involving power, manipulation, and control, and Kody Brown's defense no longer just disintegrating, it is tumbling before the very eyes of all. As the families depart, cameras flash, reporters calling out, "Mr." Brown, did you regret your words on that voicemail? Do you worry about losing it all? But Kody will not respond, walking off into the night, his shape engulfed by strobing lights. Christine, meanwhile, hesitates, turns to the cameras, and in a voice flat but firm speaks the words, "The truth doesn't need defending, it defends itself." And with that, she storms out of there, leaving the public to digest the words, and the audience to wonder what's next that will be revealed. The fourth day of testimony is met with oppressive silence, the kind of silence where the creak of one chair sounds like thunder in the courtroom, and as all find their places, the weight of all that has already been said hangs like smoke after fire, thick and impossible to avoid. Kody sits in the defense table looking more haggard than ever before, dark rings around his eyes, slumping posture, the formerly confident patriarch now a man unpeeling under the suffocating weight of scrutiny, while Christine sits erect and unflinching, her presence demanding attention not through loudness but through raw toughness, the very essence of a woman who has nothing left to fear. Now the expectation is almost electric because rumors have already run through the courthouse corridors that new evidence, something irrefutable and incendiary, will be produced, and the tension circulating in the air is equal measures of fear and excitement, like before a storm at last arrives. The first of these witnesses called is not a relative, however, but an old business acquaintance of Kody's, a fellow by the name of Daniel who used to work with him on real estate deals connected to the family, and as soon as he sits down at the stand, you get a view of Kody's face reddening with rage, his lips tensing into a snarl as if he can already taste betrayal oozing from Daniel's mouth. Under oath, Daniel begins carefully, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "I worked with Mr. Brown on several property acquisitions over the past decade, and what I observed raised significant concerns." The jury leans in, pens ready, eyes sharp, and Christine's attorney wastes no time pressing for details. What concerns, what deals, what secrets. And then Daniel lands the very first gut-checking punch. "I was told to set up shell accounts in other people's names, that channeled money in a manner that concealed it from some of the family members." The audience gasps. Christine quickly closes her eyes as if the vindication sears and heals simultaneously. Janelle audibly breathes out, and even Meri rouses from her reserved aloofness, gazing at Daniel in shock. Kody leaps out, banging on the table, shouting, "That's a lie! You were fired for incompetence!" But the judge instantly glares him into silence, warning him that such a reaction will not be allowed. Daniel goes on, more confident, explaining spreadsheets, transfers, and handwritten notes purportedly written by Kody himself, instructing the hiding of funds. He creates duplicates of emails, signed agreements, proof that Christine's lawyer hastily stamps and brings in, and suddenly the case no longer sounds like family members firing accusations, it sounds like cold, hard fraud. Robyn is sobbing again, muttering to herself, No, he wouldn't," but her words are drowned out by the tidal wave of discovery, and Kody, face reddening, writes furiously on a legal pad, thrusts papers at his attorney with shaking hands, his facade continuing to erode second by second. The lawyer attempts to shoot holes in Daniel's integrity, tossing around money motivation, anger, and hyperbole, but Daniel responds coolly, holding up time-stamped documents and stating that he only emerged when he could no longer bear the shame of being complicit. The jurors scan the evidence intently, their pencils scratching, their faces darkening with each piece of paper presented. Christine sits still but forceful, her stillness yelling louder than any words. She doesn't need to boast, the facts are doing it for her. Meri leans on Janelle, telling her something, and although we hear no words, we can see the slightest nod of Janelle's head as if to say, "It's worse than we imagined." And then there is the knife. The lawyer asks Daniel, "Did any other members of the family know about these accounts?" And Daniel pauses before answering, "Robyn knew." The room explodes, every head turning to Robyn, who begins to sob so hard she almost doubles over, maintaining, "I didn't know what it really was, I thought it was just bookkeeping." Misery gleams in Christine's eyes as she catches the flash of betrayal that even Robyn's devotion can't conceal, and Kody shoots Daniel a look of hate that's so intense it seems palpable. The judge demands order, thumping his gavel, his voice firm as he calls for silence, and as Robyn trips back into her seat, tissues to her face, the image comes into focus. Kody was not only a bad husband but a manipulator who spun webs so complex that even those who were closest to him got caught. Christine's attorney hesitates, allowing the flood of feeling to recede before delivering the next bombshell. "Your Honor, we have a taped deposition of a financial auditor who cross-checked these transactions independently." With your permission, we will play a snippet. Courtroom darkens slightly as the tape plays, the flat professional tone of the auditor reciting discrepancies, unexplained transfers, and indications of willful cover-up. The jurors sit motionless, hearing words that are detached but appalling, each sentence eroding the ground under Kody's defense. Kody reclines, his eyes empty, his gaze racing frantically as if searching for an escape door that does not appear. Christine observes him, not with victory but with something more tragic, something more chilly. This is not a woman basking in victory. This is a woman observing the man she once loved demolish himself under the eyes of the world. The air thickens unbearably as the lawyer goes on hammering Daniel, weaving the pieces of evidence into a tale of calculated deceit, manipulation, and manipulation, portraying Kody not as a misguided dad but as a calculating father who used love as a cover for domination. Courtroom is transfixed, all eyes on the dramatic breakdown of a man who sold the facade of perfect plural marriage to millions. Even the judge seems fatigued, the burden of the revelations bearing down like an unspoken hand. The day wears on, the depositions mounting taller and taller, each one more incriminating than the last, until at last Christine's lawyer drops the question that cuts the room in two. "Mr. Brown, will you take the stand?" The words linger there in the air like a challenge, and everyone looks to Kody. His attorney mutters angrily, shaking his head, but Kody's pride is a hydra that will not be subdued, and after a minute of searing silence, he stands up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, his face twisted into a grimace of anger and desperation. The bailiff administers the oath, and Kody mounts the witness stand, seething at Christine as if she is the cause of his ruin. His tone begins smooth, measured. "I never concealed anything from my family. Everything that I did on their behalf," but he begins to unravel under cross-examination. Christine's attorney slices in short order, inquiring about the shell accounts, the tapes, the discrepancies, and Kody's responses become sidelong, his tone combative. The jury observes each twitch, each bead of sweat trickling down his brow, each fumble over his own words, and the picture of the self-assured patriarch crumbles into that of a trapped man. His rage reaches a point where he yells, "They're distorting everything! I built this family, I provided for them, and this is how they return it?" His voice rings out, raw and unfiltered, the mask completely shed. The judge bangs his gavel for order, but the harm is done. The jury has witnessed his fury, his lack of control, his bare desperation. Robyn cries into her hands, Janelle shakes her head in shock, Christine stands firm and cold, and Meri allows her tears to fall quietly down her face finally cracking after all those years of holding back. The day concludes with Kody remaining on the witness stand, his testimony a jumble of half-truths, lies, and tantrums, his attorney's efforts at turning it around floundering hopelessly against the wave of evidence and passion. When the judge brings the day to a close, the courtroom hums with shock and expectation, because everyone knows tomorrow will be worse, that Kody will be cross-examined with no shield remaining, only naked nerve bare. Outside, the cameras swarm again, Christine walking past with her chin high, saying nothing this time, her silence louder than any words, while Kody storms past reporters snarling, "You'll see, this isn't over!" But the world watching knows it already is. And as the courthouse clears out into the evening, the rumors swell louder. What else is to be uncovered? And how much longer can the Brown family hold on before they disintegrate completely under the crush of betrayal, lies, and truth that will not remain hidden? The fifth day of testimony broke heavy with the promise of a storm that everyone knew was on its way, because today was cross-examination day, the day Kody Brown's credibility, or what was left of it, would be placed under the microscope, and as the courtroom filled anew with the hum of energy from reporters, family members, and onlookers, there was a feeling that this would be the day that broke Kody to pieces or granted him the sliver of redemption he so desperately yearned. But as Christine entered the room, poised, serene, almost queenly in demeanor, with Kody entering behind her looking ruffled, jaw set, tie askew, his eyes darting about the room with the feral intensity of a man backed into a corner, it became apparent before a single word was uttered that the scales were already tipping. The judge brought the proceedings to order, and Christine's lawyer stood slowly, cradling a binder as thick as a bludgeon, and when he settled his eyes on Kody, the room held its collective breath, every eye fastened to the drama unfolding. The interrogation started innocently enough, sussing out timelines, verifying Kody's involvement in some of the money decisions, but gradually it tipped into a fine blade of accusation. Mr. Brown, can you tell me why money from account 47B was transferred to an account belonging to Miss White, which forensic accountants have traced directly back to you? Kody moved, his jaw opening and closing before words at last tumbled out. That was an emergency fund for family. It wasn't secret, it was there if they needed it. But the lawyer jumped, waving documents, bank slips, pointing out the dates which matched Christine's efforts to draw on household funds and being informed they were drained. Gasps of shock ran through the crowd, Christine's lips compressing, Janelle's head shaking in incredulity, and even Meri, normally so reserved, allowing a soft scoff to escape. The lawyer pushed harder, question after question slicing like punches, asking why travel to Las Vegas was categorized as educational expenses, why luxury vehicles were included as business deductions, why checks signed by Robyn had notations in handwriting belonging to Kody, and each time Kody attempted to spin, to beguile, to deflect, the lawyer countered with receipts, with exhibits, with proof that shorn the defenses until all that remained was the stark picture of a man floundering. His voice cracked under the weight of his own contradictions, his temper flaring as he barked, "You're twisting everything to make me look like a villain," and the attorney's cool reply sliced through. "No, Mr. Brown, the documents speak for themselves. You've done that without my help." The jury scribbled furiously, some exchanging glances, their faces hard to read but their intensity undeniable, and Christine sat perfectly still, her eyes never leaving Kody, the very picture of quiet vindication. Then came the emotional pivot. The lawyer asked, "Mr. Brown, do you recall on March 14th informing Christine that the family car could not be repaired because there was no money, leaving her stranded for weeks?" Kody paused, stuttered, then nodded grudgingly, and the lawyer pulled out a document indicating that on that same day, Kody had taken thousands from the household for a personal trip, and the courtroom broke into whispers, murmurs, gasps that hung like smoke. Christine's calm fractured by just a fraction, her eyes welling up as she recalled the shame of those times, and Janelle's fist cramped in her lap, icy anger etched on her face. Robyn wept outright, shaking her head as if in refusal to accept what she could not bear to hear, and Kody lashed out once more, "I was doing my best! You have no idea the pressure I was under," but his words were less words of truth and more words of excuses, feeble shields against a tidal wave of evidence. The cross-examination darkened, venturing away from money into personal behavior, the attorney bringing out texts, voicemail transcripts, letters penned by the children, yes, the children, chronicling moments of neglect, manipulation, or favoritism, each word a dagger piercing not only Kody's defense but his reputation as a father. One of the most poignant moments was when a letter from one of the elder children was read, the unsteady handwriting retained as evidence. "Dad, I don't get it when you tell us we're all the same when you spend all your time with Robyn and her children. I feel invisible." The room froze in silence, the words hanging heavy, cutting deeper than any bank slip or account number ever could, and Christine finally broke, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, her hand covering her mouth, while Janelle turned away, unable to watch, and even Meri's stoic facade shattered, her shoulders trembling. Kody, to his surprise, was at a loss for words, his lips trembling, his eyes brimming as if the truth of his kid's suffering cut deep through the shield of his ego. Undefined. He whispered harshly, "That's not right. I love them all." But the harm had already been done. The jury had been given the unvarnished, untainted, pure truth straight from the heart of those most hurt. Tweet alert. The lawyer, never tapering off, went on, "Mr. Brown, is this equal love? Undefined. Is this creating a family? Undefined," yelled Kody back. "Families are messy." Undefined, but the judge pounded his gavel, cautioning him again, the court on the verge of erupting with emotion. The hours crawled by, question upon question, bombshell after bombshell, until at last Kody collapsed in the witness stand, dampness on his shirt, responses dwindling to mumbled half-denials and tired breaths, his accusations once boiling with energy drained by fatigue and the incessant rhythm of the cross-examination. Christine's lawyer, feeling the win, administered the final blow, posing sharply, "Mr. Brown, isn't it true that the sole motivation for keeping some of these accounts secret was so you could keep control, monetary, emotional, and otherwise, over the women in your family?" Undefined. The ensuing silence was excruciating, seconds stretched into centuries, and while Kody shook his head furiously, his lips did not shape any words, his silence more convicting than any denial. Christine's countenance turned hard, steel replacing the tears, and the pens of the jury flew wildly as the moment seared itself into the trial's heart. The judge, at last calling a halt, adjourned for the day, his tone serious as he warned the jury to consider carefully what they had seen. But as the gavel fell, the verdict in the court of public opinion already appeared on the faces of those who stood before him. The news crew out there shouted for comments, microphones pressed forward, but Christine strode by silently, dignity intact, while Janelle growled to a passerby under her breath, "This is who he really is," and Meri, tears openly streaming down, whispered only, "I don't know what to believe anymore." Kody stormed out moments later, flanked by his attorney, his face contorted with rage and humiliation, snapping at reporters, "This is a witch hunt! You'll see the truth when it's all over." But his words fell flat, drowned out by the roar of a crowd hungry for justice, for closure, for the spectacle of a patriarch brought low by his own secrets. And as evening crept over the courthouse, the rumors swelled into convictions that tomorrow would see even steeper cuts, that Christine's case was no longer merely one of freedom but of laying bare an entire system of domination, that the family once constructed in harmony and belief was now on trial for its very heart. The sixth day opened beneath a sky that reflected the mood within the courthouse, gray, heavy, full of the threat of an impending storm yet to be unleashed, and as the crowd pushed toward the courtroom doors, the air was heavy with rumors that today could be the real turning point of the trial, the day Christine's team presented their most incriminating evidence, the type that didn't just challenge the credibility of Kody's claims but had the potential to destroy it altogether. And as Christine entered with Janelle and even Meri by her side, their show of unity was impossible to miss, while Robyn followed along behind Kody, hanging onto his arm with a desperate tenacity that was more survival than devotion. The judge restored order, his voice firm but with the weariness of a man who had witnessed too many lies untangle, too many hearts shatter, and then Christine's lawyer stood, his voice steady but his eyes thin as razors as he declared, "Your Honor, today we introduce the evidence that proves not only financial malfeasance, but a calculated course of manipulation and coercion meant to isolate, control, and silence the women in this family." The room strained, jurors leaning forward, reporters writing furiously, and Christine's eyes hardened, her jaw clenched as if preparing for the torrent of painful reality that was to be unleashed. The initial blow was that of surveillance reports, receipts and files of hired private eyes years ago, evidence that Christine's whereabouts had been monitored not by strangers, but by people who were hired and paid for by accounts that traced back to Kody himself, an information that caused a murmured gasp in the courtroom as Christine's face turned white, her lips opening wide in shock, while Janelle groaned softly to herself, "I knew it! I knew something was off," her fists clenched against her lap. Kody jumped up, chair screeching, his voice escalating, "That's a lie! I would never do that," but Christine's lawyer let another pile of papers fall, telephone records of late calls from Kody to one of the investigators, dates and times all ticking into place with the logs of surveillance, and the room held its breath after that, the jury glaring, their incredulity giving way to something uglier, contempt. Christine hung her head, tears running down her face as she whispered, "So it was him all along," and her lawyer, softly but firmly, confronted Kody with the question that cut through his braggadocio. "If you were not seeking to control Christine, why did you need to follow her everywhere?" Kody stuttered, his face flushed, his hands waving wildly. "She was reckless. She was threatening the integrity of the family." I had to defend, but the judge intervened, reminding him for the second time to calm down, and the picture was fixed, of a man who rationalized spying, rationalized control, rationalized fear in the cause of family. Then came testimony, and it came not from Christine or Janelle but from one of the older children, called unexpectedly to the stand, their voice shaking as they spoke of times when they had felt silenced, punished for being on the side of their mothers, times when Kody's favoritism for Robyn's household made them feel abandoned, forgotten, and unwanted, their voice cracking as they confessed, "I felt like if I wasn't perfect, if I didn't agree with him, I didn't matter." Christine covered her face with her hands, quietly weeping. Janelle grasped her chest as if holding a broken heart together, and Meri, caught between loyalty and shame, gazed at the floor with tears falling silently down her cheeks, while Kody sat stock still, his face unreadable, his eyes flicking toward the child but unable to meet the gaze long. The jurors stirred uncomfortably, their heads shaking, some scribbling furiously, the courtroom charged with the rawness of a child's truth exposed. And then the lawyer played the recordings. covertly kept voicemails, angry arguments in which Kody's voice, unrecognizable, rang out, raising his voice, issuing veiled threats about cutting people off financially if they didn't get into line, dictating that unity meant submission, that family meant dictatorship, and as the sound played, resonating through the hushed courtroom, Kody's head dropped into his hands, his body stiffening as though the walls themselves were closing in. Robyn, sobbing uncontrollably to one side of him, whispering prayers which did little to cushion the impact. Christine raised her head, face tear-streaked but blazing with pain and determination, and her lawyer, his voice firm, posed the question to the jury. Is this the voice of a man who loves equally, who leads with compassion, or is this the voice of a man who rules by fear? The weight of the question hung in the air, unanswered, because the answer was already etched into the expressions of every person in that room. Kody tried to recover, tried to turn the narrative, standing to declare, "This is all being twisted. Those recordings are taken out of context. I was under pressure." But his lawyer yanked him back down, whispering wildly, aware that each protest, each denial deepened the hole. The judge's patience thinned, his gavel cracking hard, and Christine's team had one last thing to say. They laid out emails, financial records of not only mismanagement but outright fraud, accounts routed through shell names, cash shuffled in circles to cover its tracks, and the suggestion some of those funds were spent not only on personal indulgences but even to pay off debts not related to the family in any way. The room hummed, the journalists almost jumping out of their seats with the gravity of the scandal, and Christine's voice, shaking but urgent, rose above as she finally addressed them directly. This wasn't ever about unity. This was about power. About control. And I will no longer remain silent. Courtroom came alive, the judge demanding order, but the damage was done. The myth of Kody Brown as a committed father and husband lay in tatters on the floor. As the session drew to a close, Christine's lawyer produced one final, crushing question. "Mr. Brown, if all of this is made up, as you maintain, then ask us, why did you tell Robyn to delete some messages? Why did you shut down some accounts during the week this probe commenced?" Kody stood petrified, his lips compressing, his eyes scurrying around the courtroom for a lifeline that didn't exist, his silence lingering into an eternity more eloquent than any admission. The jury saw him fall apart, the onlookers leaning forward as if they saw the very moment a man's empire came crashing down. And when the judge finally adjourned at last, his voice solemn and measured, the feeling in the room was one. Something had been irretrievable. Christine, Janelle, and even Meri stood together, exiting in unspoken strength, while Robyn held back, holding onto Kody's arm as he buckled under the weight of his own decisions. His face empty, drained, a man who used to rule over dozens of family members now unable to rule over even the benefit of the doubt. Outside, the throng churned with excitement, journalists yelling questions, flashes of cameras, and Christine, pausing only for an instant, spoke to them with words that hit like lightning. "This isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's been silenced, every child who's been made to feel less. We deserve better. We demand better." Her words were repeated, trending on headlines in minutes, igniting debates around the nation regarding family, control, and the thin line between leadership and dictatorship. Kody, pushing through with his lawyer, yelled, "This isn't over!" But the desperation in his voice belied the fact it was already lost. And as the day drew to a close, the courthouse stood in the darkness like a fortress where secrets were yanked into the light, and the rumors in town swelled into certainties. The jury's decision was still days away, but the verdict of the people was already sealed, and what tomorrow would bring was not merely testimony but the accounting of a man who could no longer flee from the truths he had spent his whole life burying. The seventh session opened with an air so tense it was almost unendurable, the courthouse packed with those who knew that with each passing day the trial was no longer simply about Christine versus Kody, but about the fall of a whole mythology, and as the bailiff called order and the judge sat down, a ripple of silence swept over the room, heavy with the feeling that revelation still waited hidden in the shadows, ready to strike. Kody came in accompanied by Robyn, her face smeared from tears, clutching at his arm as if to hold on to a ship caught in a hurricane, while Christine arrived accompanied by Janelle and, more unexpectedly, Meri, whose tacit solidarity with her former sister wives had become one of the most gossip-perfidious shifts of the trial, because if even Meri, who had suffered so much for so long, was opting to distance herself from Kody, then the foundations of his defense were already shattered beyond salvation. Christine's lawyer started by stating they would produce evidence that uncovered the last layer of deceit, and although Kody laughed out loud, rolling his eyes, the jury leaned in, anticipating the next blow. The first witness was startling. A one-time accountant hired to keep the Browns' sprawling and frequently disorganized finances in order, a man who slumped rigidly in his suit as he described falsifying records, altering receipts to hide costs, rerouting money that should be funding all the wives, often into accounts linked solely to Kody and Robyn. The lawyer put it bluntly. "Are you saying to this court that Mr. Brown willfully deceived his wives, maintaining them financially subordinate while he held executive power?" The accountant nodded grimly, producing spreadsheets that told the story in cold numbers, and the weight of those numbers landed like boulders in the room, Christine bowing her head, Janelle glaring with a mixture of fury and vindication, Meri's lips trembling as though she was realizing for the first time how deep the betrayal ran. Kody leapt to his feet, shouting, "This is character assassination! He's lying. He's angry because I dismissed him." But the judge cut him short with a quick crack of the gavel, advising him that another such outburst would result in contempt, and for an instant the erstwhile proud patriarch seemed diminutive, trapped, his voice lost to the power of the bench. But the most devastating moment of the day had not yet come, because Christine's team then revealed personal journals, Meri's journals, submitted as evidence with her permission, and as the attorney read excerpts aloud, detailing years of silent suffering, years of emotional manipulation, years where Meri described feeling erased, unseen, kept tethered to promises that were never fulfilled, Courtroom collectively inhaled in shock. Meri sat stiff, silently crying, and Kody's face set in stone, the mask cracking as he cursed under his breath. "You would do this to me?" And Meri finally spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "You did this to yourself, Kody." The effect was seismic. Meri's quiet but public break from him shook the room, Christine reaching for her hand in a silent gesture of solidarity, while Robyn clutched Kody harder, her sobs echoing in the heavy silence. The jury listened, not only balancing evidence but seeing the unraveling of a marriage dynasty, and it seemed as though the trial itself had transcended legal combat to become public judgment, a platform on which all the cracks that were kept hidden were pushed into the open. And then there was the emotional sledgehammer. Cross-examination by a therapist who had treated the family throughout the years of the Sister Wives TV show, subpoenaed, their professional insights turned into courtroom weapons. With clinical accuracy but crushing empathy, they outlined a dynamic in which one member habitually pursued dominance, in which disobedience was defined as treason, in which obedience was required for love. They did not swear, but their measured words held unquestionable authority, and the courtroom swayed on every syllable as the therapist summed up. "In my professional opinion, what we witnessed was less an act of partnership and more an act of control masquerading as unity." Kody attempted to laugh it off, a bitter, tinny sound, but the laughter held no ring of truth, eliciting not sympathy, but only cold glares from an unmoved jury. Christine's lawyer then moved on, producing a final piece of evidence, an unsigned copy of a contract, handwritten in Kody's handwriting, detailing rigid rules for contributions around the household, behavior, and even visitation schedules with the kids, a document which read less like a family plan and more like the bylaws of a dictatorship, complete with financial stipulations for non-compliance. Christine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Janelle muttered under her breath, "I knew it!" Meri shook her head in incredulity, and even the judge's brow furrowed in surprise as he read the page. Kody stuttered, "That was never official. It was just notes. Just an idea," but the devastation was complete. The picture of Kody as a kind leader was erased, leaving behind only the terrifying image of a man whose family vision was based on domination. Journalists wrote furiously, some of them whispering as if even they could hardly credit the magnitude of what was being revealed, and the pens of the jury scratched across paper like chisels inscribing a verdict in stone. Christine's lawyer ended the day with a sentence that lingered well beyond courtroom dismissal. "Families are founded on love and trust, not contracts and surveillance, and this jury will determine which this was." The gavel came down, the room erupted into a babble of sound, and Kody stormed away, face red, yelling at Robyn to hurry along while Christine, Janelle, and Meri stood together, their solidarity a quiet but potent refutation of all that Kody had attempted to demonstrate. Outside, the media swarmed, headlines already framing the day as the breaking of Kody Brown, and Christine, though exhausted, found her voice for a brief statement. The truth matters. That's why we're here. That's why I'm not going back. Her comments went viral on social media, fans and trolls alike analyzing every bombshell, every chink in the armor of the family they had thought they knew, and Kody, pursued by cameras, growled, "This is all lies. This is all manipulation." But his voice, once authoritative, now seemed shrill, desperate, as if a man screaming into a gale no one thought he would live through. The eighth and last session began with a sort of electric weight, a hush so heavy that even the creak of the judge's chair appeared resonant, for all knew this was the day when months of testimony, tears, secrets, betrayals, and buried truths would at last reach their end, and the courthouse filled with reporters, fans of the Sister Wives television show, legal observers, and others who had simply come to see the unwinding of a narrative that once seemed the face of unorthodox family cohesion, but now stood on the brink of devastation. Christine stepped in first, her posture serene yet unyielding, flanked by Janelle and Meri, the three walking side by side as if to announce before the world that although the marriage perished, solidarity among women who had suffered was not, and their appearance drew whispers around the gallery, while a few moments later Kody walked in with Robyn, her mascara running down her face, clutching his hand so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes scanning the room as though in search of one who still believed in their version of the tale. But the eyes of the jury, the press, and even distant observers appeared cold, unsympathetic, bereft of the tolerance once accorded to a man who had spent years presenting himself as a righteous patriarch. The judge started by reassuring everyone that there would be order, that this was the last session, that there would be closing arguments before the jury retired to deliberate, and that there would be no theatrics allowed. But the irony was that theatrics had characterized the entire case, and as Christine's lawyer stood to speak, it was obvious the courtroom was preparing for one final tempest. In a voice firm and unyielding, the lawyer ran through the case, the secret bank accounts, the manipulation of finances, the journals that oozed pain onto their pages, the therapist's testimony that stripped away the veneer of harmony, and the draft contract that exposed Kody's concept of family as a framework of rules and punishment instead of love and respect. "This isn't about whether plural marriage is possible," the attorney explained, walking in front of the jury. "This is about whether faith and family gave Mr. Brown the power he used to deceive, to betray the trust, to use these women, and to abuse the authority he claimed was granted to him." Christine's attorney addressed the jury with one last blow. "You are not only judging a man, you are judging what is true, and the truth has been heard loudly in documents and witnesses in the bravery of women who would no longer be silent." Christine remained quiet, but tears collected in her eyes as she nodded, holding Janelle's hand as Meri blotted her face with a tissue, the picture of three women who had discovered their voice together overwhelming every fantasy of harmony Kody had ever presented. Then it was Kody's turn, and his attorney rose, his words sharp, his delivery fierce, but though he spoke of bitterness, of vendettas, of manipulation against his client, there was a hollowness in the argument, as though even he knew the weight of evidence was too heavy to counter. And when Kody himself insisted on making a personal statement, striding to the stand with defiance, his voice cracking with rage as he declared, "They're painting me as a monster, but I gave them everything. I gave them name, children, home. And now because I did not allow anarchy to prevail, I get crucified? This is all revenge." The impact was the reverse of what he had meant to achieve. His words sounded egotistical, defensive, his refusal to admit their hurt only reinforcing the image conveyed by Christine's group, and when he swung around at Meri and spat, "You of all people should have remained faithful." The gasp which swept through the courtroom was like the air being drawn from the room. Meri, no longer intimidated by years of silence, stood up and addressed him directly, voice shaking but firm. "Loyalty isn't about submission, Kody. Loyalty is founded upon respect, and you destroyed that a long time ago." And she sat down, the moment freezing into the sort of raw, unscripted melodrama that would headline for weeks to come. The judge, visibly fatigued with the circus, told the jury to withdraw and deliberate, and as the 12 men and women exited, the room hummed with hushed speculation, news reporters flitting out to give the world the latest in real time, and within the courtroom Christine closed her eyes, mouthing a prayer for fortitude, while Kody stalked back and forth like a trapped animal, muttering under his breath to Robyn, who held on to him, mouthing, "They'll see the truth, they have to, though." Her words conveyed little belief. Minutes crept by like hours, each tick of the clock drawing out nerves until finally the bailiff spoke. The jury has reached a verdict, and the room fell into immediate silence, the air charged with expectation. The four persons stood, fingers shaking slightly as they opened the paper, and in a clear, heavy with history voice, they read, "We, the jury, find in favor of Christine Brown, ordering full monetary restitution for withheld assets, and confirming that emotional and psychological abuse was present within the marital dynamic as presented." The words struck like thunder, the gallery gasping, Christine covering her face with both hands, Janelle hugging her, Meri weeping openly, and the three of them embracing in a moment of catharsis that the cameras recorded and the world would never forget. And across the room, Kody's face twisting with anger, his fist crashing the table as he bellowed, "This is corruption! This is a sham. You'll regret this, undefined," before the gavel pounded down again and the judge, with icy authority, warned him that any further outburst would see him removed in chains. Robyn attempted to soothe him, her face streaming with tears, but Kody broke away, striding for the door, cameras popping, his towering figure now that of a man imploding before millions. His empire crumbled not by external forces but by the words of those he believed he dominated. Outside, the courthouse steps were a war zone of noise. Cheers for Christine's supporters, reporters yelling questions, cameras pushing forward, microphones begging to hear every word, and Christine, caught between Janelle and Meri, looked up and spoke in quiet strength. "This was never about revenge, it was about truth, it was about demonstrating to my children and to all of yours that love cannot endure in the absence of honesty, that family cannot endure without respect. We stepped away from terror today. Undefined, we moved towards liberty." Her words, carefully chosen, rippled on social media, TV, and headlines in a matter of minutes, a call to arms for those who have watched the sister wives drama unfold over years, turning the trial into something greater than itself, a beacon of shattering shackles, of revealing the unseen expenses of poisonous control. Meanwhile, Kody, storming from the courthouse, barked at reporters, his voice hoarse. "You don't know what you're talking about, undefined. They'll twist this against me, undefined, you'll see undefined." But the more he shouted, the smaller he seemed, his voice drowned by the chant of supporters crying Christine's name. And as night fell on the courthouse that last evening, the cameras recorded one final shot. Christine, Janelle, and Meri moving off into the night together, shoulders back, heads held high, the light of street lamps falling on them not as victims but as survivors, as women who had taken back their narrative, while in the other direction Kody slipped into the darkness with Robyn, his form diminishing into night, his legacy forever changed.